All right, so in his Rose Garden address, where President Trump announced the day of economic liberation for the United States, he issued a warning that has since come true. You need to be very aware of, and I'm going to build up to this important warning and point in this video. We have the Democrats and the media flooding the zone right now with false information meant to fearmonger and confuse you into thinking that we need to remain in the status quo economically. Jen Psaki outlines this enemy position right now against President Trump. And very importantly and informatively, after you will listen to what former hedge fund manager Ray Dalio, perhaps the leading expert on global markets, what he has to say, which reveals the hard and important truth about the economic situation that we are in right now. Then finally, we'll get to President Trump, who has been consistent on this issue for over 50 years. There is a lot of fluff out there, and there are a lot of opinions left and right about this economic and tariff issue. I hope that this sheds some common sense light on some truth for you. Let's start with the enemy position. I'm Zach Costello.
Donald Trump's tariffs are just over, the newest ones, I should say, are just over 24 hours old. And they seem to be going about as well as nearly every economist expected and predicted they would. I mean, markets hit an absolute free fall today is the only way to describe it. This headline from the Wall Street Journal sums it up pretty well. U.S. stocks are headed for biggest wipeout in market value since March of 2020. March of 2020, we all remember, was the COVID crash. The last time also, Donald Trump also happened to be president back then too. But looking at that impact today in the markets, it's kind of no wonder he waited until the markets closed yesterday to make his announcement. So with all this news, his typically reliable buddies on Wall Street pretty much see these tariffs as an enormous disaster. It's easy to see why. I mean, look at the impact on the markets. And there's another market day opening tomorrow. For the American people, Donald Trump is raising prices on nearly everything you buy. Toys, cars, furniture, fruit, even your beer if you partake. It will almost certainly cost the average American family thousands of dollars. And lots of serious and sober economists are now talking about the possibility of a recession. Now, to be clear, Donald Trump told us he was going to do this repeatedly. Kamala Harris tried to warn us all too, repeatedly.
Okay, so I want to point out a couple things about the stock market for your awareness. First, Psaki and the left are using metrics over 24 hours to determine the success of an economic policy. Do not fall for this fear mongering. Anyone telling you that an economic plan is a failure because of how the stock market reacts the next day is, truthfully, an idiot. Years matter, not days. You notice how Psaki tried to pin the stock market decline from COVID on President Trump. I want to point out, look at the rebound after 2022. Again, initial market reactions do not tell the long-term story. But finally, speaking of those gains since COVID, look at the trajectory of the S&P 500. We have seen increases in the stock market value unrivaled over the course of U.S. history over the last 5 years. Why is that? Well, we have seen unprecedented infusion of money into the money supply. I say propping up company earnings, just like home prices over the last 5 years especially. This has increased our nation's debt and created the inflationary period, causing prices on everything to rise. Like Psaki just tried to say that Donald Trump is raising the price on everything. The prices on everything have been going up significantly for the last 5 years. Everything is thousands of dollars more expensive for Americans. And why is this important? Because our current way of doing economics is not sustainable. And adjustment and correction is needed. Don't take my word for it. Here is an actual expert, and I know that's a red flag term right now, but Ray Dalio explaining this problem effectively.
It feels like we're at the tail end of a cycle or the beginning of a new cycle.
Yes.
Do you think that's fair to say?
Yes.
The famous 80-year cycle. So this is obviously a pivot point. If we could just start with the first, debt. Can you give us a scale, a sense of the scale of global debt right now?
It's now unprecedented in all of history, and I want to just explain that how it works. There's a supply-demand situation. The way the debt cycle works is think of credit and our credit system as being like a circulatory system. That credit brings buying power, brings nutrients to all of the system. But that credit that we buy things with, we buy financial assets, we buy goods and services with, creates debt. And that debt accumulates like plaque in a system that begins to have a problem because it starts to squeeze out spending. For example, the US budget, about $1 trillion a year now goes to pay interest rates. And over the next year, we're going to have over $9 trillion of debt that we have to pay back and roll forward, hopefully. So there's a supply-demand issue with this debt. One man's debts are another man's assets. And if those assets do not provide an adequate return, or they feel that there is risk in those assets,
Yes.
there's not enough demand for that debt, there is a problem. And that problem is that interest rates then start to rise, and those holders of the debt begin to realize there's a debt problem, and worse on this supply demand is that they have to sell the debt. Imagine if you thought your assets are not good, you're going to want to sell those assets, and that creates this terrible supply-demand balance that produces a great conflict. Now, the central bank can either let that happen, interest rates rise, asset goes down, economies suffer, or they come in and they print a lot of money. And at the end of the day, they print a lot of money, and as a result, you have a monetary inflation type of situation.
And this inflationary period is what we have been living through. This is what we're going through right now. And you know how Psaki tried to fearmonger you into believing that prices are going up because of Trump. Guys, prices are already up, and it's because of what Ray Dalio just explained right there. The only way to correct what is going on is to adjust what we are doing on the economic front. We cannot continue to pump money into the system, which is what we've been doing. And what all of these economic experts who say what Trump is doing now is not going to work. These experts have gotten us into this unsustainable debt and inflation situation. Why should we continue to listen to them? We need a different approach. And this is why President Trump was elected. And this is something that he has been consistent on for over 50 years. Watch this. This is important before I show you Trump's warning from the Rose Garden.
Last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not. But I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
I mean, first look at Oprah just gushing all over him there. But he said it. If it got so bad, maybe he'd have to. So here we are. And here he is, actually delivering on what he has always said he'd do and warning us about the things that are going to happen. Listen to this.
In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Always, the fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again, I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, you know, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. You know, it's like, I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Yep. Okay. So here's my final point, and I know a lot of you feel this way too. None of the so-called experts that are so opinionated and have had their way for the past, I don't know, 50 years, as President Trump just mentioned there, have led us to the point of economic stability that is sustainable. Their way has gotten us into trouble. And sure, living conditions are better for Americans than they were 50 years ago. And we have more money right now. But can this continue the way that we are currently doing things? We are on the verge of collapsing under our debt. And when we don't have the ability to just continue to push more money into the system, then what? At this point, I am willing to trust President Donald Trump. I'm willing to perhaps spend less or perhaps change spending on foreign products in order for America to make it financially. I'm willing to endure a stock market adjustment to set things right. And I think these are things we all need to consider. And do not fall for the gaslighting and fear-mongering from the status quoers who have gotten us into this situation along the way. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure to subscribe if you watch this channel consistently. God first, quick hitting commentary to keep you informed and in the truth. I'll see you in the next one.